Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. Each episode will bring you in-depth discussion with experts, community leaders, and analysts who will share their insights, experiences, and predictions. From local elections to global diplomacy, we'll provide you with the tools and perspectives you'll need to navigate today's real-world landscape.
Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. I'm Lisa Chafee.
And I'm Michael Nash.
So, Mike, today we're going to pivot a little bit and not talk so much about politics, but provide our listeners some valuable information on what to look out for when it comes to mortgages and taxes. And joining us is the president of the National Taxpayers Union, Pete Sepp. Sir, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you very much for joining us, yes.
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be aboard.
So give us a little background. I've never heard of the National Taxpayers Union until now. Tell us what you guys do.
Sure. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan citizen group. We were founded back in 1969 to work for lower, fairer, simpler taxes, less wasteful government spending, and accountability from public officials at all levels. We have supporters and members across the United States, including in Ohio.
Wonderful. Taxes are a big topic here in Ohio right now with property taxes. As a matter of fact, Ohio, in case you hadn't heard, is 4th or 5th in the nation on home foreclosures because people can't pay their property taxes. So very important information. And one of the topics that you wanted to share with us is explain to us about Fannie and Freddie adopting this Vantage Score 4.0 over FICO scores. You know, and for those of us who need the books for dummies, kind of guide us through it a little bit and make it easy to understand.
Well, they should be selling the books for dummies here in the nation's capital, where I am. Many members of Congress could use copies of those books. So taxpayers are concerned about mortgage finance and housing policy because they have often been put on the hook for tremendous financial liabilities. When you think back, for example, to the late 2000s, 2008, 2009, when the so-called housing bubble burst, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which provide mortgage liquidity. In other words, they take a bunch of mortgages, they bundle them into securities, and they allow the finance of mortgages to move more smoothly through our system. Well, Fannie and Freddie made a lot of bad bets with very risky loans, subprime loans they were called. And it turns out that they themselves experienced a very serious cash crisis to the point where taxpayers had to bail out Fannie and Freddie to the tune of about $200 billion back in the late 2000s.
Didn't they make a movie?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to ask real quick, didn't they make a movie about that?
Yes.
Okay.
Several movies, actually.
Oh, okay.
And none of them had a happy ending for taxpayers. And that's one of the reasons why National Taxpayers Union, my organization, cares so much about this. We were actually warning as far back as the late 1980s that these unfunded liabilities that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were taking on were not really made explicitly clear in the financial system, the political system, even to taxpayers. You know, there was an implicit guarantee that Fannie and Freddie would somehow put up the financial resources to keep the mortgage markets liquid and whole. Taxpayers didn't really know that until the bill was presented to them back in 2008, and the implicit taxpayer guarantee became an explicit one. Well, again, we never want to be in that situation, especially now when the mortgage market is upwards of $12 trillion. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guarantee a huge portion of that. And if the mortgage market goes underwater again, we're not talking about a $200 billion bailout. This could be a $500 billion, even a $1 trillion bailout at a point in time where the federal government and taxpayers have far less capacity financially to meet a bailout like that than they did back in 2008. So if we want to prevent this kind of bailout from happening, from taking us by surprise, we need accurate measuring tools for risk in the mortgage market. We need, for example, a very accurate and predictive credit score so that when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are guaranteeing mortgages for homeowners, we know very precisely what the risk of default is for each loan. Credit scores are one important tool to help figure out that risk of default.
So our listeners, especially the younger ones, to clarify for them, back in 2008 when they did these bad subprime loans, if memory serves me, it was because they were loaning to people who had really should not have been getting those loans.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. They did not have either the financial capacity for a loan in the first place, or they didn't have sufficient capacity for loans that were being made that were so large. And either way, it meant that defaults were going to rise, and rise they did.
Right. So now they want, back in 2020, it is 2025, and just still in July of 2025, Fannie and Freddie started using the Vantage score. So explain to us first, what's the FICO score, and then explain the Vantage, and then let's compare them.
Sure. FICO developed a tool, a credit score, that was based on lots and lots of scientific and economic data designed to figure out as precisely as possible what the risk was of a given mortgage of defaulting and what kind of borrowing capacity that a potential homeowner might have. And hence, you have a larger score if your credit is good, your borrowing capacity and repayment capacity are good. If you have a lower score, quite the opposite. Now, FICO has been the standard tool for assessing mortgage risk for many, many years. And competition in developing good, different measurements of credit scores is a good thing. Obviously, we don't want to mandate it. What we want is a competition where the best scoring methodology rises to the top, is the most predictive, and protects taxpayers best. Well, Congress thought that FICO wasn't an adequate player in the competitive environment, and they said, well, let's mandate competition. Vantage Score lobbied a lot of members of Congress and said, look at our score. We not only think it's more predictive, we think we can qualify more people to get into homes. Well, lo and behold, that attracted members of Congress to passing a law saying, hey, the federal government needs to evaluate more credit scoring models and approve more of them for use in taxpayer-backed loans at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Vantage Score was all too happy to be a part of that mandated competition. And over 7 years of various lawmakings, rulemakings, public comments, it was decided by the Federal Housing Finance Agency, a regulator in the executive branch, to allow 2 credit scores to be used when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were evaluating taxpayer-backed mortgages, both classic FICO and then Vantage Score. Well, FICO itself has been innovating. They have a different model now called 10T, which is even more predictive than their classic FICO score. Not leaving well enough alone, Bill Pulte, the incoming Federal Housing Finance Agency director under Donald Trump, said, well, we're going to allow two scores to be used. Again, we're kind of overturning the decision that was made by our predecessor. And we're basically going to say that from now on, Vantage Score 4.0 and Classic FICO will be used in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's scoring regime. And so what that means again is this is not a competition where the best score is shown to be the winner, the one that predicts credit defaults the best. The government is simply mandating that both scores be used. And the problem there is taxpayers are put at greater risk because this is not a competition based on merit. It is a competition based on political motivations to get more people into mortgages and get them into houses, whether or not they can afford them. That's kind of a return to 2008 that we're so concerned about here.
So what kind of things does the FICO score look at? Obviously, if you've had a home previously, they're going to look at those previous mortgage payments, look at rent, if you paid rent. What else are they looking at?
They want to look at timely payments on other kinds of loans, not just housing. They want to look, obviously, at your work history, your ability to grow your income, or at least to keep your income stable. So there's a whole lot of data that goes into the FICO score, not only Classic FICO, but FICO 10T. Vantage Score uses some of that data too. But again, this is not necessarily a free and fair competition between credit scores because Congress is putting its thumb on the scale here.
So how is there benefit to for us, the taxpayers, on Vantage over FICO or no?
Well, apparently there is very little benefit. Interestingly, several think tanks, among them the American Enterprise Institute and the Urban Institute, and a consulting firm called Milliman, which does a lot of work in financial services policy, they're doing side-by-side comparisons between FICO and Vantage Score, and they're coming up essentially short here by saying, you know, when you adjust for various differences in the data methodology and what they look at a given point in time with a given borrower, Vantage Score is really not that much more predictive than FICO is. So we've been going through this legislation, rulemaking, public comments, tweets essentially by the FHFA director currently, Bill Pulte, over trying to require a credit score competition among two models when there's not a whole lot of difference in predictability of default here. This is a big strain on the system when you require Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to look at two scores. That's going to add to the costs of a mortgage closing. That's more overhead for lenders to go through. That's more overhead for credit checks. And ironically, Vantage Score itself is actually owned by the three credit bureaus. So they're another part of the mortgage lending ecosystem. And again, you sit back and you think, well, if the point was to have competition between two credit scores and one of the competitors is owned by the credit bureaus anyway, what are you really serving here? Whose interests are possibly being elevated here? It sure isn't taxpayers' interests.
Yeah, seems like a conflict of interest to me.
Are there competitors besides Vantage Score and FICO? I mean, I'm sure there are, but and have they been brought to the table, or is this something that they have been legislatively silenced?
Currently, we do not see additional competitors coming into this market, but there's nothing that could prevent it from happening. Certainly, if someone out there has a better mousetrap, who is able to see into credit histories better than FICO Classic, FICO 10T, Vantage Score, certainly they can enter the market and they can prove themselves, provided Congress stays out of the way, provided that the Federal Housing Finance Agency allows competition to unfold naturally rather than requiring it through some kind of mandate. I think you will get better predictability going forward. Certainly, FICO 10T is a big advance, and who knows, there might just be another company out there with a different algorithm ready to test it in the marketplace.
Well, I'm seeing Vantage Score 5.0 has been introduced, but I don't see much about it. That could be an improvement, right?
It could. And the importance here, I think, is for elected officials and appointed officials at the federal government to allow, I guess, what you could call bake-offs to occur out in the open. I mean, it took the American Enterprise Institute and Urban Institute and Milliman to actually do side-by-side comparisons of Vantage 4.0 and FICO Classic and FICO 10T. Well, we should actually, as the public, be able to see the results of how well these models predict going forward. Are they protecting taxpayers adequately in assessing risk and essentially flashing a red signal when various borrowers don't have the ability to pay back their loans? And I think those kinds of bake-offs should be made public. They really haven't inside government. Federal Housing Finance Agency and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they evaluated FICO and Vantage Score, but many of the criteria they used were not made public, and many of the reports subsequent to this decision to force competition have been redacted. So we don't exactly know why this decision was reached or how it was reached. We need to change that going forward.
Well, so here's something interesting. Just for giggles, I went into Grok and I asked the question of, how will we benefit from Vantage 4.0? And it came back with it can generate scores for about 33 million more Americans than traditional FICO models, including many with thin or no credit history. And this could help millions qualify for conforming mortgages who previously didn't. To me, that sounds a little like 2008. They got a job. Let's give these people these loans. Let's just get them in the houses and then go from there. When some people should not ever get that loan at that point in time.
Yeah, and my greatest worry is exactly what you said, that we're forgetting the lessons of 2008, and we're kind of putting this whole decision-making process on autopilot. Suppose we invent a new scoring model that lets 30 million more people into the mortgage system and allows them to qualify. Well, what does it matter then if the score is 800 or 400 or 200, if nobody is going to monitor how many loans are being made out there, what the risk level is, what the liabilities are, then we are destined to repeat 2008. That's the problem here. It is very easy to use a score to put all of this policy on autopilot instead of using it the way it should be, which is a yardstick to measure risk and inform policymakers. Hey, these taxpayer-funded programs for lending are basically taking on more risks that could blow up into a huge bailout.
Yeah, I agree. That's a risk in itself. I get the benefit of providing the wider public the opportunity to join the housing market, which is great investments. It's also, and it strengthens the country to be able to have more people in home ownership. However, the risk is there, absolutely. I'm also wondering too, some of the risks that we're not seeing. What are some of the risks that we're not seeing? So I look around and I see that, and I don't want to go too far down this road. We're talking about legislative stuff here, but I see that inventory is down. So there's not much inventory. The people who are in the housing market now are fighting over inventory, and the competition to purchase houses is getting very steep. I just bought a couple of years ago myself, and it was very difficult to jump into the situation I was in because of the competition out there for buyers. So with that, is this something that they're trying to maybe perhaps with this move of making it easier to get a loan? Is this something that they're making it easier so that those who can join the housing market can do so, and hopefully that might alleviate some of that competition with the inventory, with others trying to buy as well? You have companies trying to buy, you have people trying to buy, you have countries like China trying to buy the same house. So could this be something that they're trying to make it easier for folks to get into, so it might alleviate some of that competition? I'm just hopefully it's not a limb that I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's a thought. I mean, risk assessment is very important, but that's also important.
It is. And I understand the motivation. I think that motivation could be better channeled at some of the other costs in this competition that are making it more difficult for people to enter the housing market. When you look at the typical mortgage closing, for example, and we testified to this in front of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau when they were investigating junk fees in mortgage lending, 44% of the typical closing consists of taxes: property tax, transfer tax, document stamps, all kinds of impact fees. That is a huge burden that especially a first-time homeowner is going to have a lot of trouble shouldering. When you look at the National Association of Home Builders conducted a recent study that about 1/4 of the price of an average home is consisting of regulatory and tax costs on the builder's side. That's also a huge burden that is driving up the price of houses.
That's ridiculous. That much in taxes for the builder. And of course, they're just going to pass those costs on to the consumer. And the consumer, to your point, is also paying these other taxes, these other fees on foreclosing costs, which nowadays are around the tune of $20,000, depending, So that's just and most people are rolling those back in their loan.
Yeah.
So they're making their house $20,000 more than they agreed to.
So all of this started under Biden, correct?
Oh, I think it predates Joe Biden, but yes, it really got going during the Biden administration. The groundwork was laid under Trump 1 and the Obama administration prior to that, but the problem has accelerated over the Biden administration.
Well, my brain goes to, I'm wondering how much of this is DEI related.
It's hard to know. I always say money is green and it impacts everybody.
Right.
And when you have this kind of tax and regulatory environment that drive up the prices of homes, I mean, that's going to be a problem for anybody in any neighborhood, in any community wanting to afford a home.
So legislatively, what is happening, if anything?
Well, we see the beginnings of some good housing policies that will encourage states and localities to take a look at their permitting processes, their various taxes on builders and homeowners. There are pieces of legislation being considered, especially by the House Financial Services Committee. Warren Davidson, congressman from Ohio, is a prominent member of that committee. Those are good proposals. I think if Congress starts looking at how at all levels of government our various regulatory and tax schemes are raising the prices of homes, that's a step in the right direction. There's also, of course, the temptation to double down on these mandated credit score competitions that aren't really making much of a difference in predicting risk. And we don't want to see more of this happening in 2026. And so these are the things we need to watch out for. If members of Congress want to do something about housing affordability, and that's going to be a big issue in 2026, the first thing to do is look in the mirror, figure out what you, as the political establishment in Congress, are doing to make home prices worse. And on the flip side, what can you do to make them better? And it is generally an exercise in subtraction, not addition. In other words, think about the burdens you're imposing with taxes and regulations. Start offloading those rather than creating another loan program, another subsidy, something else that could go haywire and leave taxpayers footing the bill.
What do we as consumers need to do now, especially for anybody who's considering buying a home anytime soon? What do they need to look out for? What advice do you have?
There are a lot of tools you can use, both on our website, ntu.org, also the Tax Foundation's website, taxfoundation.org, that will allow you to compare the affordability of taxes on a state-by-state basis. You can find out where property taxes are the worst per capita, the best per capita. Property taxes as a percentage of home value. You can do comparisons to that. You can even look up closing cost comparisons through a lot of sources, and we cite some of them in the testimony I mentioned to Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Comparison shop would be my advice, and shop not just on the basis of the total home price, but the basis of the government burden on owning that home. And you're likely to get some surprising answers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to buy a home anytime soon.
I know.
It's exhausting to think about. So you mentioned your website, ntu.org, which is the National Taxpayers Union. Any other places people should go check out? Any other websites you can think of? Or
I would also urge them to check out taxfoundation.org, where you can get some excellent comparisons of property tax and income tax burdens. There's an outfit called Property Shark that has surveyed real estate transfer taxes. That's a huge component of a typical loan closing. Check out their surveys. They'll show you which states have the highest and lowest transfer taxes on real property. Local taxes can be a real problem too. The government of the District of Columbia actually does a nationwide comparison of city level tax burdens by income. That would be worth checking out as well.
Awesome.
Interesting. Okay. Well, sometimes people are looking for homes in their own area. So I appreciate looking at different states, but also if they're trying to find a home in their own locale or a locale that's nearby. I know that I could look on my county's website and find out what I'm paying in taxes or what a particular house has paid in taxes as of recent years, right?
Yes. And if you're a current homeowner and you're not even considering relocating anywhere, it would also pay to check out your own property assessment. Many assessments we have found are either inaccurate or they're way out of whack with similarly situated properties in a given neighborhood. We've published for many years a guide called How to Fight Property Taxes, which goes through the process of challenging a homeowner tax bill and what you need to know step by step to do that.
Okay.
That's very good information.
That is very good information.
So, Pete Sepp, President of the National Taxpayers Union, we thank you for your time, this wonderful information. And again, to our listeners, ntu.org. This has been Straight Shot Politics.
Thank you.